Hi, welcome, thank you for coming on today, and just wanted to touch base with you on the questions that you may have for today with respect to skilled migrations. Okay, so now that petroleum engineer has been removed from the list, it is a little bit more of a challenge. Whenever there is an occupation that's not on the main list, there are potential other avenues that applicants can go through to try and gain residency. Obviously, if you have a skills assessment like we did for one of our clients, we were able to get a skills assessment run through quickly. He was able to get the English results he needed, and we lodged his expression of interest, I think it was on the 7th of June, and with 60 points as a petroleum engineer, he was actually invited the next day on the 8th of June. Now, there's one more invitation round before the new list comes in, which is on the 22nd of June. So my advice would be, if you can, potentially have your skills assessment, have the points needed before the 1st of July, then you're in a position to potentially get an invitation based on the rules as they are today. Okay, so post the 1st of July, other avenues that you can look at are things like state sponsorship. So there are some states in Australia that are still sponsoring petroleum engineers. So if you meet the requirements for those states, you could potentially be sponsored in those states. Other options that we're looking at with another client is the potential for permanent employer sponsorship. So she's currently employed here in Queensland and has more than 3 years experience. So there's avenues to explore for permanent employer sponsorship, and that's towards the 186 visa. CSOL and SOL list, so they're both acronyms and they sound for different things. So the skilled occupation list, or the SOL, is the main occupation list used for skilled migration. So if you have an occupation on this list, then you can potentially apply for skilled independent residency, okay? Now, the CSOL list has a number of other uses. It's called the Consolidated Skilled Occupation List, and this is the list that can be used for companies wanting to sponsor people on 457s. It can be used for training and research visas for occupations on that list. Various states can choose occupations off that list and then put them on their own state sponsorship list. So that's how the states can come up with occupations that may not always be on the main list. Okay, so the CSOL is a broader list. It's used for permanent, like I said, and temporary sponsorship, for the state sponsorship as well. Okay, so at this stage, there's no, with respects to skilled migration, no major changes to the points test with respects to how your English levels will rate, I guess. Immigration expanded a while ago the number of different tests that you can take. IELTS used to have a strong, more or less a stranglehold on it, but it has been opened up to IELTS, Pearson or PTE, TOEFL, Cambridge or OET. Now, each one of these English tests, I should say, has a different rating scale, but using IELTS, I guess, as a benchmark, if you have, say, 6 in each band in IELTS, that would equate to 0, okay? If you had 7 in each band, that would equate to 10, and if you had 8 in each band, that would equate to 20 points. Good question. I can't give you numbers, actually, I'll have a look. Give me 1 second. I can't give you numbers for this year because this year's list has been released, but until the 1st of July, the places available hasn't been reset, so that information is not readily available at this point. For last year, nurses has been for a number of years, and I think will continue to be the #1 occupation in demand for skilled migration to Australia. I think last year there was about 13,000 places for nurses. Other ones that sort of played a part were electricians, with about 8,500. Secondary school teachers, just below that. Then we had metal fitters and machinists, carpenters and joiners, motor mechanics, construction project managers, software application programmers, plumbers, and steel structure and welding trades workers. So as you can see, quite a large percentage of the top 10 was made up of trades as well. So it's not just professional occupations. And to give you an insight, the way they do it is immigration goes to industry, and we talk to like the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations to actually find out what the gaps in the economy are and where there is a shortage. So it's quite transparent, and it's done to make sure that, I guess, Australian companies in general have access to the workforce to allow them to grow and meet their demands and needs. So with things like petroleum and mining engineer being removed, I guess that's come from feedback with the downturn in the mining boom, I guess, in Australia. that would probably mean that there's been a lot of maybe Australian or in general, a lot of mining engineers or petroleum engineers made redundant, which means that there's more of those people in the workforce, and it probably means it's harder for Australian mining and petroleum engineers to get jobs, and that's why that would be removed from the list. So it is, as I said, a quite transparent system and is quite fluid. And it is possible in regional areas, different states, I should say, have different requirements when it comes to regional sponsorship. Okay, so there are certain states in Australia that may provide state sponsorship in that state if you have been studying there or completed studies in that state. But as I mentioned, each state varies quite differently. So to give you a broad answer, it may be possible if you are living in a certain area to gain sponsorship from a state government, okay? But again, each state has their own requirements. So that means that generally speaking, it's probably best to come in and get specific information to your case and your occupation as well. And then what we would do is we can provide you with an overview of all the state sponsorship possibilities in your occupation and what each state would require with respects to that, rather than me trying to tell you yes or no. I guess the answer to that question is that it really depends on the state, the occupation, and what the other requirements are. Okay, so self-sponsorship. So yeah, listen, self-sponsorship is possible. One of the things that immigration has brought into regulations recently, or into at least the policy advice manual, which is how they interpret the regulations, is a lot of wording around sponsorship with respects to securing a migration outcome. So what they're trying to avoid, or what they're trying to look at, is the position being created or the sponsorship being given solely to secure a migration outcome. And in those cases, I'm guessing that immigration is going to look at those a lot more carefully to actually define as to whether it is a genuine position that fits within the scope of the business and that the person can work in that role and it has value, or if it's been sort of more designed to give that person a migration outcome. So generally speaking, it's not self-sponsorship or a director being sponsored within the organisation is still possible, but it has been earmarked in the last few months as something that immigration, from our experience, appears to be looking at a little bit more carefully. So with respects to being assessed as an engineer, what the Skills Assessing Authority is looking to see is that if your degree is substantially relevant to an Australian engineering degree, which would be 4 years in duration. Now, if it is substantially relevant, there's a number of different ways you can be assessed. One is through an accord qualification. So if your university within a country, and the country is signed up to, say, the Washington Accord or the Sydney Accord or the Dublin Accord, these are different accords within the engineering area, that your degree might already be recognised, okay? If not, then the process would generally be go through and do competency demonstration report, where you would be writing reports based around your experience as an agricultural engineer. Now, that experience can be gained during your degree, post your degree, and each one of those reports, what you'd be aiming to do would be to illustrate or demonstrate, probably more aptly put, your engineering knowledge, okay? So starting with an overall view of the project you're working on, going through things like your role in the organisation, and then really eliciting that engineering knowledge. So going through and talking about the work you did, the engineering work, how the process you went through, sometimes an obstacle, how you overcame that with engineering knowledge, and the outcome. So again, we would help our clients with respects to meeting the structure that they're looking for in their reports. Now, agricultural engineer, like a lot of engineers, is on the skilled occupation list. With respects to the actual numbers for next year, we don't know yet. We will know after the 1st of July, but I guess it's safe to say that you are on the list post the 1st of July. So what that means is that moving forward, if you are able to score get a positive assessment and then post that, score the points you need, you then may be able to submit an expression of interest and be invited to apply for residency. There are other avenues with the petroleum engineer. Like I said, with one of our clients, if you're able to get a skills assessment and get the 60 points and do that before the 22nd of June, like we had just done with one of our clients on the 7th of June, we got the skills assessment, we did the expression of interest with the points on the 7th, and we were actually invited on the 8th to apply for residency. So it hasn't been removed from the list until the 1st of July. So that means there's still one more invitation round. The other way that we're looking at with other clients is either through state sponsorship. So certain states are offering state sponsorship for petroleum engineers, or employer sponsorship as well. So Julia, if I understand, so say for example, I'll give you an example. If you were studying, say, a bachelor degree at Griffith University and you had a major in marketing, and you were going to change that major to a different area, or even to a different bachelor degree, if the visa was granted originally for that bachelor degree, then there wouldn't actually be a need for you to change the visa, okay? Obviously, you can extend your visa if the timeline goes longer, but if you're doing a course at the same level and even at the same institution, it sounds like, for what your visa was granted for, then you wouldn't need to change the the visa at that point in time. Yeah, at this stage, as I mentioned earlier, even though the list has been renewed, the new visa application, occupation ceilings haven't been reset, so they're still currently sitting at levels for this year. So once the new year kicks over, that information should be more readily available on immigration's website, so we can actually give you a little bit more feedback later on. To give you an idea this year of how it's worked with some IT occupations, say like systems analyst and business analyst have actually required higher points to gain that invitation. And that's simply because there was, I guess, more supply or more people wanting to apply than there was, or more demand of people wanting to apply than there was supply of places in that occupation. So in essence, we can kind of see once people are making applications, what sort of timeline they're looking at with respects to waiting to receive an invitation. So again, post 1st of July we'll be able to give you a little bit more information about what those ceilings are going to be. But in anything with migration, the more points you can get, the better. So if you know it's going to be competitive in an occupation like IT, then work on doing things like the professional year, or gaining more experience, or working on your English level to try and give yourself the best chance of getting that invitation. So if you're sitting there with 60 and you can increase your IELTS score, your English score, and make it 70, then in most cases you would probably be likely to get an invitation in less than a month, okay? But if you're sort of sitting on 60 and 65 and there's a lot of competition, it's really hard to gauge who's ahead of you and how many people are jumping ahead of you each month that might be coming onto the system too. So if you want to be sponsorship, so if we're talking about, say, a 457 visa, so if we're looking at a 457 visa, generally speaking, if it's as a restaurant manager, you would have to have the skills or the experience, the qualifications or the experience required to meet the minimum requirements. So, for example, if you're looking at restaurant manager, you either need to have a qualification equivalent to, say, a diploma in a related area, like, say, hospitality management or higher, to meet those requirements, or you would need to have a minimum number of years of experience. I believe that's 3 years experience as a restaurant manager to meet that. Now, if your experience is kind of as a waiter or a waitress and not really in that senior level management, then that may not meet the requirements if you don't have that degree. So one way to get yourself through that process may be to undertake that diploma in hospitality management and maybe get some experience while you're on a student visa part-time, working as a manager or a supervisor even in that restaurant, because that's going to give you a good sort of footing and it's going to look better in your case. Now, one of the things that immigration is looking at again in policy around managers in restaurants is that if there's a restaurant manager and if there's an owner and if it's a small business, then how involved is the owner in the business, and does it warrant having a restaurant manager as well? So they're sort of one area where you really have to show that there is a need for that restaurant manager, and in that case you would need to be doing the tasks and the duties of a restaurant manager throughout. Okay, so public relations. So again, Emmanuel, when it comes to something specific like state sponsorship, ACT, I'm guessing you're looking at the Australian Capital Territory, which is a region of Australia, the capital, where Canberra is. The Australian Capital Territory released a new state sponsorship list a little while ago, and there was a lot of, hype around it, whereby they're allowing people who are studying in that state or who have studied and potentially working in that state to apply to a wider list, almost like the Consolidated Skilled Occupation List in a way, with respects to state sponsorship. So if, for example, you were to go, Emmanuel, to ACT and study in Canberra, then there is potentially avenues for you to apply as a public relations advisor, I guess it would be. For that though, even taking one step back, you would have to have a skills assessment in that area. So the minimum requirements for a skills assessment as a public relations advisor would be to have a bachelor degree in that area and at least 1 year of experience that was 20 hours a week or more post-qualification. That would give you the skills assessment, and then if you were to study in that state, then there may be avenues for you to apply for state sponsorship. However, again, I'm reluctant to give you too much information around the exacts of it until we sort of sit and have a meeting. But in general, yes, it may be possible for you in the ACT if you were studying in that state to then apply for state sponsorship, and if they were accepted, then you could apply for residency. Okay, so partner skills when it comes to skill migration. If you have a partner, okay, so husband, wife, or same-sex partner, however it works, if you're applying together and you both have an occupation on the main skilled occupation list, or the partner has an occupation on the main skilled occupation list, they have a skills assessment in that occupation, and they're included in your application, and they have the minimum IELTS and everything else, then that can give you an additional 5 points. So say, for example, if I was applying and I was a civil engineer and my partner was a civil engineer, my partner would still have to go through the skills assessment process, have to have the minimum IELTS of say 6 in every band, and then if I included her in my application, it could give me an additional points for partner skills because she has an occupation on the list and is included in my application. In a nutshell, the student visas have been reduced in number, so there's actually only going to be 2 visa subclasses. There's going to be a 500 visa, which will be the main visa, and a 590, which will be a guardian visa. So instead of having 570, 571, 572, 573, 574, 575, 576, all of those are going to be shrunk into the 500 subclass visa. Now, the way it works in the future, just again briefly touching on it, is each institution will be given a ranking and each country will be given a ranking, okay? Now, when you add those two together, it's sort of done in a table form, and that's why next time we do this presentation, we'll show you the table, but it's done in a table form with respects to risk rating, and that will tell you what you need to provide. So it's trying to, I guess, in a way, simplify the process so that the student visa application process is transparent and people can see what they need. Now, schools' ratings may change over time, so this will be monitored by the Department of Immigration based on how the students that they enrol perform, whether they continue their courses, whether they have their visa cancelled, whether they have their visa refused. All of these things play a part, okay? Currently on Immigration's site, you can actually go in and test this by choosing the institution you want to study at and your country, and that will give you an overview of what you'll need to apply for the visa. So in a lot of cases, in general, I think it's been simplified, the process as it looks. Visa applications will be done online now as well, so it will be a lot easier for us to undertake applications even from here for our clients overseas, which is a good thing. And similarly, there's also been things eased in the sense that if you're onshore on a tourist visa, then you may be able to apply for your first student visa in Australia as well, whereas it might not have to be overseas. Yeah, I mean, looking at it from a skilled migration perspective, Ashu, is that if you've done at least 2 years of study, the way it works is that if you've done 2 years of study and you've at least completed that Certificate 3 qualification, so the 3, 4 and diploma, and as long as you've gained, say, 6 months or 360 hours of work experience during that, then you'll be able to apply for a provisional skills assessment. Now, that provisional skills assessment would allow you to then apply for the graduate work, the 485 visa, for 18 months. Now, during that 18-month period, you would need to get 1 year of full-time work experience, and you go through what they call the Job Ready program. Gain 1 year of full-time experience, they would come out and do a practical assessment on the job. At the end of that, you would then be able to get a full skills assessment, and as if you had the points, you would be able to apply for residency. So that's kind of the process for most trade occupations. Now, the thing is that that's one way of getting permanent residency. So your question did ask around permanent residency. So the things that we would generally map out for clients would be that that's one possible way of getting residency, but similarly, if you've finished that Certificate 4 in automotive, and if you've got a regional employer that's interested in sponsoring you, then you may be able to go either directly from that student visa for permanent regional employer sponsorship, or you could go to the graduate 485 visa, the graduate work I mentioned, find an employer in a regional area and then be sponsored for residency that way as well. And having that IELTS score that you had would meet the requirements of 6 in each band and having that certificate 4 would meet the requirements of going for regional employer-sponsored migration as well. Okay, so if he's got 6.5, then just looking at that brief little bit of information you've got, he may not have enough points to meet the requirements. So the minimum requirements you need to apply would be 60 points. Now he may qualify through regional sponsorship as well, but breaking it down in stages, the skills assessment is the first stage, and unless you've got an occupation that's Accord recognised, you have to write the reports. Generally speaking, it takes a week or so, maybe 2 weeks or more for our clients to write the reports because they are quite detailed. We give you assistance through that process. Then from the moment we lodge the skills assessment, if you do the fast track, then it's generally completed within 1 to 2 weeks. If you do normal processing through the engineering body, it would take more like 12 to 16 weeks. So it's a longer process there. So depending on if you're willing to fast track it. Now, if say for example you had IELTS of 7 in each band and 3 years of experience, you chose to fast track it, you got your skills assessment back in 2 weeks, then the day we get it back, we could then do the expression of interest. And then it just depends with that 60 points on how many other people are there. But for example, in 2 occupations this week, I'll use the 2 engineering occupations we did this week, we lodged the nominations with 60 points, 1 civil engineer and 1 petroleum on Monday, I believe, was the 7th. And we got the assessments back that day and the English results back that day. And then that evening, or I guess it's the morning of the 8th, we received the invitation. So with 60 points, 2 applicants received an invitation in less than 24 hours. So the sooner you can get something done, the sooner you can get them in. It is currently on the SOL now, but it is one of the occupations that's been removed post the 1st of July. So because it's been removed from the main SOL, again, it's one of those occupations that you may have to look at other avenues. So state sponsorship, employer sponsorship as well. If you have been, say, studying a master's in Australia, as long as it was a 2-year master's and you got your first student visa after the 5th of November 2011, then you may still qualify for the post-study work visa. Another one of our clients has done a diploma and a master's, so we have to lodge his before the 1st of July because he's applying for the graduate work. And for that visa, the 18-month one, he has to have a skills assessment and an occupation on the list. Thank you guys for coming on. I hope you got some information out of this. Again, we're trialling this new live chat sort of arena and as a way to sort of get more information out there about changes and what's happening. Thank you for your questions to all of you that took the time to write in today. I hope it was helpful for you, and yeah, we look forward to hearing more from you in the future and potentially helping you with your process.